we as men are taught to develop strength. And so it's the main tool that most men develop a sense of self and identities through suppression. When you do that, you're going to cut yourself off from a vast amount of emotional data and information, a good amount of truth about who you actually are. And what you're going to show the world is a kind of hollowed out or one-dimensional version. Numbness is not an emptiness, a void of emotions. So when men say, oh, I'm numb, oh, I don't feel anything, what they're really saying is, I'm so inundated with emotions and no one's actually taught me how to deal with those emotions.
Both man or woman, there's inherently a mother wound that sparks the deepening of inner work.
Everything that you experience in the first 18 months of your life is coming through the portal of the mother. I had this moment, the child in me was jealous of my son. I'm actually sad. Like, I'm joyful that I'm getting to give him all this, but there's a part of me that's deeply sad that my son is getting the thing that I longed for as a kid.
Love is everything, and truth is how it speaks. You're essentially just sharing truth, which is love, because truth is light. What do you think it really means right now for men to feel strong on the outside, but soft and broken and disheveled in the middle? Why is that really the beacon that most men get to pay attention to now?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I wrote about in my book is this notion that we as men are taught to develop strength through suppression. And so it's the main tool that most men develop a sense of self and identities through suppression. And when you do that, you're cutting yourself off from important information and truth about who you actually are. And so you have to kind of develop this performative persona, right? I mean, this is kind of like a, modern culture right now. Have you seen like the performative males? Have you seen this?
I'm sure I have.
There's like a whole bunch of like reels and content and shit like that online of the performative male. And, it's this kind of like archetype of the guy on the train or on the bus, like reading Camus and, sort of looking hipster and shit like that. And it's more of a performance than it is an actual sense of self-identity.
There's many in Austin.
Yes,
like
yeah, I would imagine.
And LA.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. But, I think it's when suppression is the main modality that you have to deploy in order to be perceived as strong, you're going to cut yourself off from a vast amount of emotional data and information, a good amount of truth about who you actually are. And what you're going to show the world is a kind of hollowed out or one-dimensional version of who you think other people want you to be. And that's the case for so many of the men that I work with, whether they're entrepreneurs, CEOs, hedge fund owners, day traders, doesn't matter, right? Rappers, fucking NFL athletes. Can I swear on your podcast?
Of course.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Drop the F-bomb.
Yeah, like placed in the right sentence, it can really add emphasis.
But
yeah.
So I think all of the men that I've worked with, and I noticed this because this was my journey, right? It's like I grew up in the Texas of Canada, in Alberta, big trucks, oil, country music, cowboys, guns, not a lot of emotions, right? And playing hockey, it's minus 30 out for, half the year. And there was a kind of performative aspect to being a man. And that didn't really include emotions. It didn't necessarily include emotional mastery. And so how myself and many men have been taught to deal with things like emotions is just to ignore them, is to suppress them. And then we have all of these maladaptive behaviors to cope with this intense emotionality that we've never been taught how to deal with. And so a lot of men are walking around in the world lost, alone, unable to connect in their relationship, unable to get their needs met relationally, because they've severed themselves off from an energetic, emotional truth that is a very important part of who they are. And, it's like the saying, the longest journey a man will ever take is the 18 inches from his head to his heart.
Hawkins.
Yeah. And so that journey is rough. But in mythology and story, when you look at any story of a man, when you look at any myth of masculinity, at some point a man will have to go on this journey. And otherwise he'll just crater his life. He'll destroy his life, and it's like what Jung said, right? Unless you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life and you'll call it fate. And that's what a lot of men's lives are. And so I think there's this unraveling right now in our culture where men are having to put down the masks, or their life is forcing this kind of bottoming out and reconciliation, like a forced reconciling with the performance of who they've been. And I think for as men, like, we don't get what we want out of it. That's the funny thing, is that we think that by making this trade, well, if I just stuff the grief down, if I just stuff the sadness down, if I stuff the trauma down and I suppress it long enough, then eventually I'll like harden up, I'll toughen up. I'll be able to deal with the challenges of being a man. And what ends up happening is that man becomes incredibly fragile because he's actually not capable of dealing with the real hardship of life, of his life, of love, of loss, of grief, because he's always full. He's always emotionally full. And I've talked about this, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I've talked about this notion that numbness is not an emptiness, a void of emotions, that numbness is an overwhelming amount of emotions that your brain has had to sever itself off from. So when men say, oh, I'm numb, oh, I don't feel anything, what they're really saying is, I'm so inundated with emotions and no one's actually taught me how to deal with those emotions. And so I've just suppressed and repressed them for so long that my brain has turned off the recognition that that's there. Wow. And that's a brutal place to be. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on all that.
You can't deal with anything if your bathtub is full.
Right.
So we've talked about this a lot on the show, the general adaptation model from Hans Selye, right? There's the experience of the stress, there's the holding on or the recapitulation of the stress, and then there's the exhaustion phase. So what I'm hearing from you is that if men are in the exhaustion phase, it's not like they don't have emotion. It's just stuck emotion, which I learned from Dr. Stephen Young. It's not necessarily that men are traumatized. It's that this energy and motion, emotion, is actually physically stuck in their tissues. Yeah. So anything can set them off.
Yeah.
Somebody cutting them off in traffic, their wife making one little tiny comment. Their inability to be able to deal with holding masculine containment or just emotional regulation or emotional capacity in any regard doesn't exist. So life will bring them situation after situation to show them that their bathtub is full. So then it brings the question, how do men empty the bathtub? Right. How do they get from exhaustion to emotional fluidity? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what most men are doing, and what I did for a long time, is use coping mechanisms, right? It's like use porn, use weed, use booze, use these substances or behaviors that hit the somatic reset button. Like a lot of the men that I've worked with that have challenges quitting porn or watching porn, frequently in a way that they don't like, it's not aligned with their values.
Yeah.
A lot of the times that's happening because they don't have any other strategies to come out of a sympathetic dominant nervous system, come out of a stressed nervous system. So they wake up stressed, they go to work stressed, they interact with their kids stressed, they interact with their partner, their wives, their girlfriends stressed, and there's no relief from this sympathetic orientation. They're just in this, it's like the rev limiter on your car is just always right about to redline. And that's how a lot of men in our society run, is that their rev limiter is right below the red line. And then something happens that just, pops it over. And so a lot of guys are using these external mechanisms as a means of, well, maybe if I just jerk off and watch porn, then I'll get this big dopamine dump and my whole system, prolactin will release in my body and my whole system will just all of a sudden, redline and then come way down. And then I can finally relax. So part of what needs to happen, to kind of get back to your question, is men need to go through a kind of crucible where they confront the difficulty inside of them. And when you look at, again, going back to myth and story, or you just look at the lives of, great men throughout human history, there's always been this inflection point where a man has to kind of enter into the cave and face the dragon. But for most men, that dragon is them. It is their emotional body. It's their emotional intensity. And after working with men for over a decade, what I've seen is that it's not that men don't feel in the same way that women do. It's that that men oftentimes feel emotions in a more prolonged manner and in a more intense manner. And so a lot of men enter into therapy, and there's this unconscious or sort of semi-conscious perspective of the therapist, the psychologist, the practitioner, whether it's a coach or whoever, isn't going to be able to handle me. They're not going to be able to deal with the intensity of what I'm carrying inside of me. And so one of the things that we talk about when men come to work in our organization, whether it's the Alliance or out to a retreat or whatever, is I'll say immediately, no matter what it is that you're going through and dealing with, it's not going to be too much for me to handle. And for most men, there's an immediate sigh of relief, because most men are walking through the world with this perspective and this experience of no one can fucking handle me. Mm-hmm. Because what I'm experiencing inside is so intense. The grief, the anger, the rage, the violence, the like sexual impulses that exist inside of me are so ferocious that no one could possibly handle it. And that's a very lonely place to be. And it's not only a lonely place to be, but it's a very unique experience to believe that the intensity that lives inside of you is not only too much for other people to deal with, but then you have to be a kind of shield from the grenade that exists inside of you. Mm. And so a lot of men's life force actually is directed towards trying to shield the people that they love from the emotional intensity that exists inside of them. Isn't that sad?
It's sad, and it's this continuation that I'm excited to chat about with this on your podcast, this epigenetic transfer of learned behavior, really like a learned helplessness. Mm-hmm. Because if we were born in perfect modeling, I think I only have one friend that had this kind of modeling. But when a father and a mother have this loving relationship, they practice co-regulation. The father knows about containment. The mother knows about admiring and compliments. We just don't get that, I think, on the whole. I don't know the percentages, but we don't get that as men. I know you didn't perfectly get that either. So then,
not even close.
when there's a vacuum created by this learned helplessness, there is, and you talked about mythology, I think about the hero's journey with Joseph Campbell. Yeah. There is this separation and initiation. And I find that in initiation, there's like the Obi-Wan that comes. Mm-hmm. There's the mentor. You had a mentor, and I don't know if you still have him, but I think you said he was on a mountain in Colorado with like no Wi-Fi access. Yeah. He's just like this guy that he's the guy behind the guy, to quote Swingers. In that initiation phase, that's when the mentor appears in our beautiful life story that we're living here. How did that mentor step into your life? And what kind of containment did you have or not have around your own emotional capacity at that time?
Yeah. Well, my initial mentor was like a French-Canadian guy named Bernard, and he's, imagine just like a human Rottweiler, right? But like, 74 years old. Okay. And he was, he had the jowls and everything like that. But that happened in a moment in my life where I had bottomed out. I was lying, I was cheating, I was complete wreck, complete disaster. From the outside, to speak of masks, from the outside, everything looked great, right? Yeah. I had this cool career. I was traveling the world. I was a musician. I was singing. I had this wonderful relationship with this beautiful woman. Behind the scenes, wreck, just disaster. And all of it came out, right? The infidelity, the lying, the substance abuse, like all of it within the span of like 4 weeks, just all came out. And I was so ashamed of all those things that, girlfriend left. I moved all my stuff into storage. I went and lived out of the back of my car for 2 weeks. I didn't want anybody to know. And when I finally came out of that, and there were some very dark moments in that period, but when I finally came out of that, I talked to my mentor, because he was a singing teacher for me initially, but he had a background in Jungian psychology. And he was always this person that was pushing me, challenging me, supporting me, loving me in a way that I just never had received before. And I remember having this conversation with him, and we were working on this piece of music, and I was just struggling, and I was beating the shit out of myself. And he said, sometimes it takes somebody to believe in us more than we believe in ourselves, and to hold that belief of what we're capable of. And he said, I believe in you more than you believe in you right now. And it was this fundamental shift inside of me of like being held in relationship in a different way by a man that I deeply had reverence for and respect. But so I opened up to him and told him what had been going on. And he really took me under his wing. He really saved my life in a lot of ways.
How did that start when he took you under the wing?
Just conversations, just having a place to confide in somebody and tell them what was actually going on. Carl Jung said that the first step of the therapeutic process or any spiritual process is confession. And that in order to start your personal work or therapeutic work or spiritual work, you kind of have to bear out the truth of what's been going on, the truth of what you've been hiding. And for me, that really was the first step to just, because nobody had known what was going on. Nobody, not a single soul in my life. And so it was like, well, here's all the stuff that's been happening, and to just like lay it bare and to still be accepted, and to have somebody say, to have him say, well, let me support you with that. And so our work shifted from me kind of like getting these music lessons to me getting Jungian psychology lessons and lessons about Buddhism and lessons about the shadow, and then working through my own shadow and working through my unconscious patterns and some of the pain that I'd been carrying and the trauma that I had gone through. And so this person that had been in my life, all of a sudden it's like their role shifted. And that's very common, right? For when mentors show up in our life, it's like they can be a friend, they can be a colleague, and then all of a sudden the dynamic just kind of shifts a little bit. And I really do believe that like mentors choose you. And I think that that's a misconception that happens in our culture today, where people are like, I gotta find a mentor.
Yeah.
And we can go to where people's work really resonates with us, and that is beautiful and wonderful. And it can be a wonderful gift. And I certainly was going to him, in a lot of ways. But he really chose to support me. And so it was this process of, dismantling some of my beliefs, getting into my shadows, getting into my fears, getting into my pain and my trauma. And then over the course of 2 years, I really apprenticed with him. And I spent 2 years helping him farm his asparagus and helping him. He actually did breed Rottweilers. And so like helping him with his Rottweilers and chopping wood, because he was older, and helping him out with his farm. And he taught me about Jung, and he taught me about analytical psychology and archetypes and symbolism and how to work with people's shadows.
When you got to him, it's on your website, you said, I bought into the most dangerous rule of men. If you're struggling, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Can you expand that?
Yeah, well,
if you've ever blown up your life for no logical reason, congratulations. Your biology works. You're not broken. You're just running an old pattern. After 10 years of podcasting and interviewing 800 plus of the sharpest minds and deepest hearts on planet Earth, I built something simple to help you interrupt these patterns fast. I kept running personally into the same stuff, and audience members would write to me and say, Josh, I'm dealing with the same core 3 things, which are expressed through emotional epigenetics, that are our emotional patterns, our unconscious beliefs, and our environment. This self-liberation blueprint is a free training where you get clear on how these 3 areas are blocking your life, and in 10 days, you can move from being stuck and distorted on the inside to clear and on purpose on the outside. The self-liberation blueprint is a 10-day jumpstart that's perfect for the human being that feels stuck, but they just can't figure out why. Now, I built this with no smoke and mirrors. I know in our world, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to personal growth and spiritual development. I built this with 24 years of my own health, wellness, and personal development life experience. So I can save you money and save you time and start getting your results as quickly as possible. On your first day, you're gonna go right into a self-assessment where we know exactly where you are and exactly where you get to be. We're gonna take you through a dream vision process and specific breath work to create your life vision that you desire in the future as if it's here right now. All of this is free because I'm here to give it to you as a mentor in the same way that my mentors gave it to me. It is purely just my gift to you. You also get free access to the Liberated Life Tribe, a community of people like you and I that are actually doing the inner work instead of just pretending that they're fine. By the time you're done, you're going to know exactly where you are in your wellness pentagon, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and financially. And you're going to have a map, a mindful action plan to move from clarity instead of distortion. This is not therapy for people that are broken. You're not broken. You're just bio-energetically burdened. And I'm here to tell you that removing these burdens is possible. And I believe you can do it. You don't need fixing. You just get to have a clear starting point and a plan that actually works with your biology. If you're ready to move forward with your life without forcing it, join me inside the Self-Liberation Blueprint by heading over to liberatedlife.com. Come join us.
Again, going back to this notion that strength is suppression, that if you just, there's something wrong with you as a man for talking about your pain or talking about your trauma. And it's the thing that so many men are terrified to do. And it's always the first thing that they need to do in order to start to create change in their life. It's like the first line of my book is, a man's work begins in pain. And so for me, the work that we as men are always called to do and have always been called to do is to understand our personal relationship with pain. And in doing so, we begin to reconcile our personal relationship with power, with our own power. Richard Rohr says, unless a man goes on a journey of powerlessness, he'll always abuse power. And what he's talking about there is initiation, right? When we as men go through an initiatory process, we're put into this kind of contained experience of powerlessness. And you can't dominate an initiatory process. You can't conquer it. You can't crush it or destroy it or kill it. You are in some ways submitted by something that's larger than you. And far too many men, myself included, never went through any type of initiatory experience. And so I fundamentally believe that when we as men lack that, we create these rock bottom moments as a means of trying to kickstart or create this forced initiation experience where it's like, can I absolutely crater my life and destroy everything and then find out who I am in that moment? Because that's what male initiation is really supposed to do. It's supposed to put you in this place of everything's been stripped away. You're in a really challenging place and you get to discover who you are in that moment. All your weaknesses, all your insecurities, all your fears, they're all right there in your face. And I think that we as men in our culture have done ourselves a disservice of pretending like that doesn't need to happen anymore. And that if we just ignore our pain and we ignore our fears and we pretend like we don't have insecurities, that will somehow make us a strong, competent, confident man that women will want to be with.
But the paradox is that women can feel this lack of integration.
Totally.
And they're repulsed by it.
Yes.
And then we don't get, quote, what we want, which is sex and affection. And I guess you could say peace that comes and yields power. Then it, for me, really touches on this concept of the rite of passage. Because I went through 2 vision quests with Tim Corcoran, and I believe you've interviewed him.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
And the massive silence that is missing from men's lives. You said that in this initiation, we are essentially forced to look at the stuff that we've been hiding and forcing. And for me, it was just so much anger about my father and a lack of awareness and really a lack of acceptance of my mother's bipolar. But it was so hard to be in nature for that long. Have you been through a rite of passage, and was that with your mentor when you were farming asparagus and chopping wood? Did you have a rite of passage moment or moments that catalyzed your ability to hold space for men and coach in the way you do? Was it one or many?
I think it was more this ongoing apprenticeship. It's very foreign for us as men to have a real apprenticeship with an elder. It's not common in our culture anymore. And I certainly had, I created vision quests for myself. I would go out into nature on my own, no technology, no books, no journal. And I would go sit out in nature for 3 or 4 days, and I would do the sit out overnight and, be with the fears of are there bears right over there? What the fuck's going on, But it was more this ongoing humbling of sitting at the feet of an elder and realizing how immature I actually was, as a 28-year-old man, like how little and insignificant my knowledge base was. And that really was transformative. And I think that type of initiation, we can have these contained initiations where, the young boy is taken out of the village and he's thrust into an experience out in the wilderness and he has to fend for himself. Like that's that's one form of initiation where it's this very brief, intense thing. But initiation can also be this mentorship and apprenticeship. Mm-hmm. And when you look at societies throughout human history, one of those two things has been present. Either young men would go through this very brief, very intense initiatory process, and the men would drag him out of the village, or he'd have to put his hands into a glove and get bitten by bullet ants or jump off of something and do all this kind of wild stuff. Or he was forced to spend time with the shaman. He was forced to spend time with an elder that was apprenticing him into something where he would be able to be more capable and competent for the village. And this is the really important piece about initiation, is that the purpose of initiation is not self-development. It's not personal development. It's not like, I'm going to be a better person for myself, and I'm going to be happier. The purpose of initiation is that we take a boy and we turn him into a more functional, more capable and competent man who's able to give back and be of service to the community, to the village. Mm-hmm. That's the purpose of it. And so when you take that away, what happens for a lot of young men, and this is why we see statistically that young men are getting decimated in our culture, right? Less men are going to college than ever before. They're dropping out of university. There's less men dating, having sex. There's way more men living at home under the age of 30 than ever before in Western culture and society. And so when we take that away, what happens is that young men don't have the opportunity to understand two main things. Number one, that there is always something larger than them in life, that they're not able to control, manipulate, dominate, conquer absolutely everything. And nor do they need to or should they. And the second thing is that they've been sculpted or crafted into a being, into a man that's able to be of service and contribute back to society in a meaningful way. And this is something that every man wants. I'll share this one last piece because I think it's important. They did a study in the UK, and there's some really interesting studies around men that have come out of the UK. One of them this is both of them, but we're looking at men who had taken their lives, men who had committed suicide. And they found two main things. One, there's this perception that men need to go get more help and get more therapy. Well, in the UK, 90% of men that had taken their lives had sought out professional help. 90% of men that took their own lives were actively in therapy or had sought out therapy. Of those men, 80% of those men were labeled as low risk or no risk at all of suicide. So even when men go seek out help from the therapeutic institutions, we've become very poor at identifying men who really are in a bad place. And I think that that's a big miss. The second thing that they found is that when they looked at suicide notes of men that had left notes behind after they took their lives, which is horrible, what they found was there was a common word that the majority of the men were using, which was useless and helpless. And so for men, it really is a damaging experience to feel like you are incapable of helping, supporting, providing, contributing to the people that you love and to a community in a larger culture. That is irreversibly damaging to the male psyche. And we can talk about socialization and biology and all those types of things, but regardless of whether somebody thinks that that's socialized or that's biological, it's still damaging. It's still harmful. And so we need to be able to create culture, society conversation where men know that they are valued and men know that they are of contribution and that we're creating pathways and means for them to do that.
Seems to me like the biology of a man, whether it's societally conditioned or not, but I know most men feel this. In my men's groups, we all feel this way. When we have purpose, we'll crawl through broken glass to achieve it. We'll do anything that's necessary. And part of my life, my purpose is to be the most loving, present husband, father I can be. I flipped through your book this morning and I was like, God, just show me the perfect part to ask Connor. And here it is. I mean, it was literally, this is what opened, okay? She reveals your shadow. Now, men come to therapy and unfortunately they take their life, which you mentioned, which is, we'll make sure to link that in the show. It's heartbreaking, but I think it doesn't have to go to that stage. I think a woman, as you write about, can be our greatest mirror. So you say that she reveals your shadow. As Jung said, woman always stands just where the man's shadow falls, so that he is only too liable to confuse the two. Translation: when we as men lack the awareness and focus on the other person, we project our shadow, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the gold, onto our partner, completely missing who we are and what we truly want within the dynamic. The woman becomes the mirror, which of course the woman becomes the mirror. My wife is my most powerful teacher.
Totally.
Full stop.
Yeah.
I'm sure your wife is too, and our children.
Yeah.
I love this passage so much, and I'm so excited that we get to talk about it because I was guided to ask you this.
Awesome.
How has this shaped your life? And why was this so important that you'd put it in the book? And third question, how does this relate to men being called forth to become truly embodied men?
Well, I think for many men, women are inadvertently the permission card holders for them to step into some type of work.
Yeah.
And that can be a, hey, babe, I found this podcast. Let's listen to it together. Hey, I think this book would be supportive for you. Check it out. At least those types of things, because men, unless you have a small group of men in your life that are actively already in it, that are pushing you and challenging you and holding you accountable, the average guy doesn't have that, right? He doesn't have other men that are asking him to be self-reflective and that are asking him to start to develop more emotional competency and literacy. And so women can really be that conduit because women are just naturally more in tune with that part of experience. And so I think for a lot of men, how they come into this work is because of women, because they've projected their shadow, they've projected their fears, they've projected their insecurities, their desires, their relationship to power onto women. And this has become very prominent in our culture and our society, that men are, it's like the reason why they can't do anything is because of women. And so there's a lot of anger and frustration between the genders right now. Women are upset because of how they were treated for a long time, and there's a kind of visceral anger and rage around oppression. And men are very upset because men collectively are in decline, and the perspective of that is that women are to blame for that. And so there's just this gender war that's going on. So that's like at a very high level, but it's social level.
It's very illusionary.
Yeah.
It's an illusionary bifurcation. I want to touch on this for a minute.
Yeah.
The red pill and the feminism, the fifth wave feminism, that men are bad and men can't be trusted.
Right.
All of this stuff, I'd love for you to expand this. All of this stuff is so entrained by the algorithm on Instagram, it makes me nauseous.
Yeah, it's gross.
This is a really big thing that people get to pay attention to. Be cautious of what you're liking and engaging with on your feed, because it will entrain you to join one of these two illusionary camps. Have you seen this?
Well, misandry and misogyny sell. They're it's very intoxicating to get riled up and be caught in a moment where, you just had an argument with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and you go online and all of a sudden the algorithm's feeding you something about how women are this way and that's why relationships are blah, 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 blah.
I've done it.
Or the inverse of that. And all of a sudden you're in this echo chamber that's just pumping, hate towards women or hate towards men into your psyche.
Yeah.
So
I've been there.
And it keeps you on the platform, right? It's like the algorithm's designed to do that, right? So it's challenging.
But the wisdom that you're bringing forth, I heard you say this quote, where a man's wound is, that is where his genius will be. If he's on Instagram, it's hard for his genius to express.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think, Jung talked about the anima and the animus, right? That we all have this masculine and feminine archetype within our psyche. And because of the way that we as men operate, right? I've been talking lately about how men generally gain a sense of identity through hierarchical structuring, right? So like when men get together, there's always this like little bit of jostling, little bit of like figuring out, where are you, where am I on the hierarchy? And a lot of that has to do around competency. A lot of it is like, some of it's around success and status, but a lot of it's around competency. It's like, how competent are you compared to me? And for women, it's the inverse. Women get a sense of identity and develop social structures not through hierarchies, but through network. And so to admit that there's a hierarchy within female social circles is actually faux pas. To say that, you, Janice, are more attractive than Becky, that's a no-no. You don't do that, right? There is no, so it's a very antithetical to how men structure their social circles and how we go about developing a sense of identity. We're very in hierarchies, right? That's a big part of it. And I think this is what's caused a lot of trouble within social circles and work environments, because men are used to competing in hierarchical ways, which is, well, I'll just outwork you. I'll just get better and more competent than you. But in female circles, in work environments and social circles, that's not the case. It's not about being better. It's sometimes about pretending that you're not. It's sometimes about something completely different, about maintaining relationship or being more emotionally intelligent and choosing, some other way of doing it, a collaboration and whatever it is. So men in workplaces are really struggling because women have figured out how to compete in hierarchical structures, but they also know how to compete in network structures. And men know how to compete in hierarchical structures, but not in network structures. And so a lot of young men are struggling because they're like, well, women have figured out how to compete in both of those places, in both of those structures. I only know this one vein, and so fuck it, I'm just gonna, I'm out.
Do you feel, that's so good. Okay, there's two things. The first is Alison Armstrong sat where you sat maybe 6 months ago, and she said, women are really good at placating and pretending. Yeah. And that's how we even get what we want. And
totally.
At first I couldn't grok it. I was like, what do you mean? Like, so you're full of shit? And she's like, kind of. It was really interesting.
She's hilarious. I love her. She's
absolutely,
so funny.
Absolutely love her. I'm going to read this quote from Scott Galloway. And I think it really is in alignment with what you're saying. So he said, I've never heard one of my male friends say, I'm depressed. I'm just super fucking lonely and depressed. You don't hear that from men. That you don't hear, I'm struggling with anger, I have erectile dysfunction. You would never hear a male friend say that. But when their mom dies or they get divorced, we weigh in with a lot of empathy. But you'd never really hear a man open up because, and this is what you're talking about, men are worried that if we display weakness, another man might kill us and take our shit from us, or the women aren't going to want to have sex with us.
Correct.
So there's a huge inability for men to proactively talk about the way they really feel.
Yeah.
I love Scott Galloway. What comes up for you when you hear that quote?
Well, I wrote about this in the book. I had a whole chapter called The Myth of Male Vulnerability, where I talked about the very real threats relationally, socially, hierarchically to men when it comes to opening up and being vulnerable, right? And it's the problem in modern culture is that it's kind of sold as this cure-all solution to men, right? It's just like, if you just opened up and were vulnerable, all of your problems would be solved. And for some men, that is somewhat true, but for a lot of men, it's not true. For a lot of men, it's not just about opening up and being vulnerable. It's also about developing competency in emotional expression and emotional mastery. And that's what men really are driving towards. But for the average guy, we all know that there's a price that's looming on the other side of us really being vulnerable. And I can't tell you how many stories I have heard from men of like, I was married and she wanted me to open up. I started to open up and it was the death of the marriage. She left because I started crying and I started talking about how I had been depressed and it just wrecked everything and she was gone.
Yeah.
And you could make a case for like maybe it was too little too late and da da da. But I've heard that in countless stories where men are dating a woman, they start to open up and they're very vulnerable, and all of a sudden, sexual attraction just goes off a cliff. So I think men see this, they know this. And again, when you're in a hierarchical structure and you show weakness and vulnerability, there is a fear that you're going to fall down the hierarchy, that you are going to find yourself lower down in the eyes of other men, that you are going to decrease your status in mate signaling with women, because the truth is that women do really, from what I've gathered, not to speak for women, but women do really want men who either can feign emotional mastery or actually have emotional mastery. And I think that that's what a lot of women are asking for. And one of the things that we as men have misinterpreted in modern dating advice is that a lot of women are saying, I want an emotionally mature man. I want a man that can open up. I want a man that can be vulnerable. And I think that we as men have missed that emotional mastery is status. That is a status.
Like a marker of status?
It's a marker, right? It's like if you're wearing a Rolex, it might, signal that you have a certain level of financial status.
Yeah.
If you have a certain, amount of followers online, there's a certain status that comes along with that.
Yeah.
But emotional mastery is also a good status marker. And we as men haven't realized that yet, that what a lot of women are saying is, hey, this marker is actually super freaking important. And for a lot of men, they go online and they hear the red pill content that's just like, make as much money as possible, buy the Bugatti, and that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
And I think if I put myself in my 20-year-old shoes, he would probably be like, that's going to be easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make the money, buy the Bugatti. That's a way easier path than dealing with my childhood trauma and my pain and my emotions, which is just like ambiguous and vague and seems brutal and hard. So I get why a lot of men move into this category of stuff it down, make more money, try and signal status in this other way.
There's a Goldilocks zone between the feminism and the red pill.
Totally.
I feel like you've done it. Really, it's a testament to your work, man. I mean, you wouldn't have a published book, you wouldn't have the following you have if you hadn't achieved some level of that Goldilocks zone. I wonder, like, from a recipe standpoint, like, what is this Goldilocks zone for men? And also, it's a double-sided question. There are many women that when they receive that vulnerability, I don't think vulnerability is weakness, but I think there can be toxic vulnerability where you're just spewing and dumping.
Or you're doing it to get something. It's manipulative.
Yeah, like I'm going to be vulnerable, but in exchange, the transaction is that you give me what I want, which is not vulnerability. That's a transaction.
That's nice guys, people pleasers.
Yeah. So like, and I know you've dealt with that too, and so have I. So the question is, there's this sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone where it's like not too hot, not too cold, of a man learning how to be a conduit for true vulnerability, which is like empathetic witness, compassionate presence. And the woman, let's just say it's a heteronormative relationship, and the woman is actually using her emotional skills to be able to take in and diffuse what the man is sharing. Can you describe both sides of this Goldilocks zone? I think this is missing the mark in this illusionary war on Instagram for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think part of that Goldilocks zone is that a man is able to very deeply understand what's happening inside of him, that he has a very robust relationship to his own emotions, and that he's able to not become them all the time. Like that he's able to regulate and then respond versus experience, get something and then react, which is how most of us men operate, right? It's like, girlfriend says something, feel triggered by it, react, defensiveness, go on the attack, shut down, right? Whatever it is. And so the real skill that men need to learn is to regulate under stress and duress and then respond. regardless of the situation. And to do that as often as can. You're not going to be perfect with it. I'm not perfect with it. There's still moments where my son or my wife, like they just, my joke is that they have the access codes to the like nuclear launch button inside of me, right? It's just like, they're the only two people. Everybody else, it's like, good luck trying to trigger me. Like it's pretty good. But like Ram Dass said, right? It's like, when you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
My mom was just here for a week.
There
I
you
get
go.
it.
There you go. So I think for men, it's being able to have this level of masterful containment over your own intensity and the charge of your own emotionality without suppressing it, without numbing it out, but actually being in full contact and relationship with the reality of your own emotions, which is hard because for most men, again, like I said, they experience life in a very intense way. And I had this conversation with Chris Williamson on Monday where he was like, do you think that the majority of men just don't feel that much? Or do you think that they feel that much and they've just learned to shut themselves off? And I was like, definitely that one. You know, the majority of men, there's very few men that are actually, you know, have alexithymia where they don't actually feel any emotions. It's very rare. The majority of men have just been conditioned to over-index rationality. And they're trying to solve every problem in their life with logic and rationality, completely devoid of emotional data and information. And it'd be like trying to, you know, choose a stock to buy on the stock market without looking at any of the information of the company. It's like you're missing the largest subset of data that you could to make this decision. And so that's the part of men. And then I think being able to very clearly, very articulately bring forward, here's what's happening inside of me. And sometimes I think as men, we overcomplicate this. And there's this weird, awkward period. You know, it's like when you were a teenager and all of a sudden you're like, we're getting boners on the bus and you're like going through puberty and you're just like, I don't know how to be now. My voice is dropping. I feel a little bit more aggressive. Like I'm getting erections. Like this is awkward. And there's this awkward phase when a man learns to interact with his emotions, where there's this big question inside of us as men because we're so focused on competency of, am I doing this right? And it's very helpful to have other men who have gone before you, who are more masterful in that field to say, yes, you are, or try this. So I think for men, it's being able to say, you know, I didn't like that, babe. That wasn't okay with me. It's not all right with me when that happens. Or here's what I'd really love. Or here's how I really feel about you. Like, God, I love when you do this. I love this part of you. I love when you speak in this way or when you move in this way. You know, like with my wife, the immediate thing that comes to mind is she just like loves dancing. It's one of the things that just intoxicated me with her in the beginning. You know, she'd put music on in the kitchen while we were cooking food and she would dance. And I was just, I love that, you know? And she does it with our kids every single day. And I'm just like, I love this about you. And I'll always express that kind of adoration towards her. So I think that's our role as men. And then the other part for us as men is being able to bring that containment to our woman.
This is so good, man. You know, I was having this visual and in my research for emotional epigenetics, I learned that the afferent, efferent messages from our cranium and our neural tree, we have double the neurons that come back to the brain than we do that come to the body.
Yeah.
So how is that a perfect code, to use your son's name, like that if men are so intellectualized when it comes to what to do, how to feel, all these things, the perfect intellectual question is, why would somatic intelligence have double the messages going to the brain from the body unless we are supposed to pay attention to the body?
Correct.
That's a really big one that I think is super missed in a lot of the somatic experienced and somatically trained people.
Well, it's a funny thing that everybody knows, you know, communication is 80% nonverbal.
Yeah.
But then most people miss what that actually fucking means. It means that 80% of your communication is not this. It's not your brain logically figuring out what I'm saying. It's 80% of our bodies interacting with one another. And for the majority of men, because they're disconnected, like a lot of men will literally walk through life as this floating head. They're just floating heads. And it's not I'm not shitting on men or shaming men. I was that man for so long. I was just this floating head that every once in a while would drop down in my dick, you know, and then that part would lead me. And that part got me in a lot of trouble, but that's the case for a lot of men. We sort of oscillate between these two heads, and everything in between is missing. And so when you start to get into this, in psychology, it's called the elephant and the rider. And so the elephant and the rider is exactly what you're talking about, that the elephant is the body, it's the soma, it's the energy of your emotions. And that's an extremely powerful force. And then your psyche is the little rider sitting on top of the elephant, telling it where to go. But at any given moment, the elephant can say, I don't care what you want. I'm going to go in that direction. I'm going to move in this direction. I'm going to have, depression because you're not listening to me. I'm going to start to experience rage because I feel helpless. I'm going to start to have massive levels of anxiety because you've repressed your sadness for 20 fucking years. And so what happens for a lot of men is they've been the rider on the elephant for so long with no relationship to the rider. And then all of a sudden the rider goes haywire or causes havoc. And then the elephant causes havoc, and they have to build a relationship with this elephant that's been carrying them around for so long. And that's what it was like for me. And to bring this into relationships, that's where, and it's not that it's a man's job to do this, what I'm about to say, but that's when women feel safe, is when you have a relationship with your body, when you have a relationship with the elephant, because every woman knows that there's a very real intensity and capability for violence, capability for danger, capability for sexual intensity that lives inside of every man. So if you're disconnected with it, how am I as a woman supposed to feel safe with and around you when you have no relationship with this very powerful energetic force? Of course, that's terrifying, right? So I think for us as men, we can find purpose in that. We can find meaning in that. We find a sense of mission, a sense of capability. And I've never seen a man once that has done this work to build relationality with his emotions, who hasn't come out the other side and found himself in a not only a better relationship or better life, but feels more whole and complete as a man. And Jung, to come back to Jung, he said that working with the shadow, working with the parts of you that you don't like, that you reject, that you want to deny as a man, that's the first large step. The second step is building a relationship with your feminine. And your body is your unconscious. Your body is the vessel of your unconscious. It's your unconscious mind. It lives in your body. That literally is the unconscious, right? So it's your emotions, it's the energetic, imprints that you've carried with you for your entire life. And so getting in touch with your unconscious as a man, as difficult and as scary as it is, because we like to be in the seat of control and all-knowing and et cetera, that's the real big piece of work, is to actually have a relationship with your emotions, with your own feminine nature, so that you're not constantly spilling that out onto your partner or onto the women in your world. And that's what I was sharing in the book, right? Is that men, we will treat, how a man treats a woman is how he treats his unconscious. So if a man is afraid of his woman or she evokes a ton of insecurities with him, that's how he feels about his own unconscious. That's how he feels about his own feminine nature. If a man is interacting with his girlfriend or his wife and he views her as this dominating, larger than life force that he's kind of afraid of, and he walks on eggshells around her, that's how he feels about his own feminine. That's how he feels about his unconscious. So women are these beautiful mirrors for us to understand our relationship with our own unconscious experience and our own feminine nature, our own emotions.
Man, you're speaking right to my heart. On the mic right here is the triangle, which symbolizes water or feminine energy. That's why I put it in the podcast, because my own journey of being in touch with my feminine, my anima as a man, has been a real challenge. And it came from inherently a deep mother wound. And I think that when we look at the way that men are unable to provide containment, because like you had said, they're already full, so they can't contain anything else. I think it really starts with the mother wound. And it's not just something that I heard from Mark Wolin. He wrote a book, he's been on the show a couple times, called It Didn't Start With You. And he believes from his research in family constellations that all wounds originate from the mother. What are your thoughts on that? I know that the father wound is also part of the conversation, but I tend to grok, and at least with my experience, and honestly, all the men in my men's group and all the guests that I've had, there's inherently, both man or woman, there's inherently a mother wound that sparks the deepening of inner work. And then at some point, the father wound comes along. Do you align with that?
Yeah, I mean, in developmental psychology, you go through different developmental stages, and the very first developmental stage is when you're prenatal. And that's when your neurology is coming online, that's when your nervous system is forming. And even after you're born, your nervous system has, and your brain has no differentiation between you and mom. There's one thing. And so everything that you experience in the first 18 months of your life is coming through the portal of the mother. So as she goes through postpartum depression, as she goes through anxiety, as she goes through arguments or stress or whatever, it's literally, you're experiencing everything through her nervous system. So I would say that, yeah, probably the origins of our wounds come from our mother, whether it's prenatal and in the womb, which I've seen and worked with quite a bit, or those first 18 months of life, which can be very challenging and very stressful. And, I think mothers have a very challenging job for sure.
So hard.
I told my wife after she had our daughter, and I watched her go through a very hard pregnancy with illness and emotions. And I was like, I am very grateful to be a man.
Me too. I have such deep respect after watching my daughter come out of my wife. It was like this surreal experience. You know, in Stargate, when Kurt Russell goes through the portal.
Yeah.
I was floating above myself. She was in a water pool, and I was watching myself watch her birth my daughter, our daughter. And I was forced in that moment to look at all the ways that I wasn't contained within me and that I didn't contain her.
Yeah.
And it was like a very humbling moment. And it took, honestly, 2 years to unpack that and go deep with like psychedelics, breathwork, therapy, IFS, MDMA, like lots of things helped me heal that. I'm curious for you, like, did you have any awareness when Code was born or when Stone was born that deepened your own work through your own awareness of what potentially you hadn't held in the best way you could?
Yeah, I mean, my son has been one of the greatest teachers. You know, I think my wife had, a really relatively easy pregnancy with him. You know, she was working out, she was working, but he struggled to come in. You know, he was breech and transverse the entire time. And the birth didn't go the way that we expected. It was very challenging. He was in a bad place, but as he's come online more and more, I mean, he's just a like little spitting image of me, which it has been very hard. He's wild and feral and he's such a huge character. He's defiant and it's like all of the parts of me that I was as a kid that made my upbringing even more challenging, and he and I have a phenomenal relationship. Like it's everything that I wanted with my dad as a kid. And I'm really getting to know the parts of him that are fundamentally different. Like he's way funnier than I am. He's hilarious. His comedic timing as a 4.5-year-old. I'm like, bro, like, how did you even think to say that?
Put him on stage
or do that? Like, what the hell? But it's really been this beautiful thing to relate to him in such a way where I can see how I was as a kid, and I can see how limited of tools my parents had, and to have appreciation for what it must have been like for them. Because I was just huge energy. It was like a nuclear power plant in my chest, just wanting to like run around and break things, and and that's him. He's just this beautiful, high energy little rocket ship, And so that's been interesting for me because I'm in a phase of my life where I've done so much work to deal with that power plant inside of me and to learn how to direct the ferocity and the intensity of my own energetic charge, and to really find a place of equanimity and ease. And then to have my son come in and be like, oh, I got to do this over again. It's like, oh, I got to do this all over again. Like I did it for myself and now I'm going to support him to do it. And so I think, and there's also been grief. I had this moment where like I do all this kind of stuff with my son. Like when he's dysregulated, I sit down with him and we sit cross-legged. We face each other like this. I hold his hands. We take some breaths together in through the nose and out through the mouth, and I help him co-regulate. He loves, wearing this tiger suit onesie. And so I bought a tiger suit for myself, and we like go out into nature because we're on like, we back onto hundreds of acres of forest and we go adventure through the forest. And I had this moment months ago where there was like the child in me was jealous of my son. He was jealous of my son at the type of relationship that I have been building with him, because it's the dynamic that I always dreamt about wanting as a kid with my dad. And that was hard to come to terms with. It's like such a immature feeling, but it was like, because I was finding myself getting frustrated with him sometimes and angry. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is ridiculous. And, he's just being a kid. And I was like, oh, I'm actually sad. Like I'm joyful that I'm getting to give him all of this, but there's a part of me that's deeply sad that my son is getting the thing that I longed for as a kid. And that, that grief that I thought I had dealt with was still there, that the boy in me was like, wait, why does he get all this? How come I didn't get this? So getting to have a deeper layer of healing over what I went through as a kid.
How did you meet those emotions without judgment?
My current mentor, my men's group now, bringing it to them and just voicing them and saying, I have shame around this. Like I feel shame that I'm even like, I'm so happy that I get to give this to my son.
Yeah.
But there's this shame that's also there around like feeling that grief that, the boy in me wanted that so badly, and kind of having this, this frustration towards my son. Like, don't you know how good you have it? Like, what are you fucking whining about? What are you complaining about? Like, don't you know how good you have it? Like, look at the relationship that we have. So I think it's one of those things where I really just like outed myself immediately. I just brought it, as soon as I realized, I just brought it to the men in my life, my men's group, my mentor, and was like, man, I realized this, and this is wild, and got to grieve it, and and then just be with him.
It's so good, because I'm in the understanding now that my job on planet Earth is to feel my feelings, teach other people how to feel their feelings, and just to be honest with each other.
Totally.
Now, it's super easy on a podcast for me to sit here and say that. I'm not being triggered. They don't have the nuclear source codes, as you mentioned. But it actually is quite simple. We have just been entrained for a very long time. It's been a deep indoctrination for us as men. I look at the way that I'm triggered by my daughter or my son or my wife, and I just always point it back to me. Eventually, maybe not in the moment. I always point it back to me of like, okay, Josh, well, how can this trigger be my greatest teacher without intellectualizing it and without judging it? I heard a phrase when I was going through a training recently that true compassion is when you're just an empathetic witness. You're just literally being there. You're not trying to fix it. You're not trying to solve it. You're definitely not judging it. But that skill set is like almost sandpaper that's sanding down a tree trunk. It just takes time to become super skillful in this regard. For men that are hearing this, and even the women that are hearing this too, what does the beginning of that sanding process look like for the refinement of not judging emotion, masculine containment? It actually is so simple. It's so exciting that it's so simple. It's like, here's the codes, y'all.
Yeah.
But the embodiment and the practice of being it is challenging.
Yes.
Because of the conditioning, I believe. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that for most men, the majority of men that I've worked with, regardless of background or trauma, regardless of pretty much most markers, the path is beginning to slow down enough and create enough space for you to just sit with what's happening inside of you. And that's where I usually start with men. It's like, close your eyes, take a breath, tell me what's happening inside of you. And that's the beginning of the work. And for so many men, that is the terrifying first step. It's terrifying. And it's almost comical now that, I'll sit and work with a rapper. I'll sit and work with an athlete, a professional football player or a CEO or
that's so cool that rappers are coming
whatever.
to you.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah, that's been a bit of an interesting one, but
I bet it changes their rap game.
definitely yes. But to get them to just sit and it's like close your eyes and connect with what's happening inside of you. And I remember working with a Navy SEAL where he had lost some brothers in the battlefield in Afghanistan. And I walked him through this process of going in and connecting with some of the grief around it. And after the process was done, coming out, and I said, "How are you doing?" And he's like, "I would rather rush a machine gun nest in Afghanistan than do what I just did." And he said, "And that's why I know I need to do it." And so that's the simple thing, is being able to slow down enough as a man to go inside, to witness and experience what's happening inside of you. And for a lot of men, that's going to be deeply challenging, very confronting. It's going to, there's going to be times where it's confusing. You're not going to know if you're doing it right. You're going to feel overwhelmed because the emotional intensity inside of you is such that you're going to realize why you've built out all of these mechanisms to cope with your own emotional body, your own physical body, your own energetic body. You're really going to get it. But the more that you can do that process and you can work with somebody, ideally, that can walk you through that process, the more you're going to find ground. And you're going to be able to work with your own emotions and work with your own energy in a way where they're not in charge of your life. Because just because you numb yourself out from them doesn't mean they're not still controlling you. And I think most men know that. They know that their emotions and their intensity and their pain and their trauma, it's controlling you, right? They know that because they're like, I see how much I have to drink and how much weed I have to smoke and how much porn I have to watch and, all of these things just to get by, just to operate normally. It's like, well, maybe that's abnormal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful starting place. I love that you said that. One last quote.
Yeah.
You said, when you try to run from your shadow, it consumes you and becomes the puppeteer, and you become a passive player in your own life. When you say shadow, that's a very hyper-used word in our world. I would say that shadow is one of two places. It's either maybe one of three places. One of them is a body that's experiencing anxiety, a body that's experiencing depression, or a mind that's shutting down the wisdom of the body itself. Would you add anything to that as far as shadow?
Well, in the traditional Jungian sense, the shadow is the unconscious psychological content that you've discarded, that you don't want other people to know about or see.
But my pinpoint is that unprocessed reality is creating a state of
correct
somatic experience.
Yeah. And so how it will manifest is through those ways. But
the story's still there.
Yeah. But I think for a lot of people, it's the access point to be tactical is starting to turn your consciousness towards, what don't I want other people to know about me? What don't I want to admit? What don't I want to acknowledge? What truth do I already know is true about me that I'm actively hiding, in my relationship? What sexual acts do I want to explore? What conversation am I avoiding? It's looking at the real tactical content of, what am I avoiding in life? What do I not want other people to know about me? Because that's the stuff that's controlling you, that's dictating you, that's creating separation in your relationship. I mean, half of the work that I've done with couples is around bringing forward some of the shit that both people have been neglecting and hiding and not admitting, of wanting or not being okay with. And when you can start to do that, then you can bring that stuff out of the shadow. So like for a lot of men now, their anger's in their shadow, completely disconnected from it, hidden from it. And the consequence of that is you have shitty boundaries. You don't stand up for yourself. You don't stand up for your relationship. And you lack expression around your wants and needs. And so for a lot of women that are with these very sort of like nice guys, but they never really know what they want. They never really know what they need. There's like the boundaries are kind of porous, and they, it's kind of like they push them over quite easily. That's because that man's disconnected from his anger. And he needs to go through a process of being able to bring that anger out into the forefront and reconcile with it. So it's not hidden in the shadows.
Yeah. I love that you said that. The way that I've understood it in my life, and especially in my marriage, has been anywhere that I'm out of integrity, even if it's like 0.5%.
Yeah.
That is a withhold.
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm avoiding. Do you find that in your life? I mean, just to pre-frame it, our teaching is mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and financial nourishment of self. So that's what we talk about in our programs and in our life method. And on this podcast, it's the pentagon that's on the flag here. Any part of my life in those 5 domains where I'm not being really peaceful and honest with myself, even if it's a tiny, like little sliver, my woman can feel it. My life through the law of correspondence brings it to me as evidence. Do you find this is the case, that it's really about a lack of integrity in one of the domains of life?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lack of admission of what's true. And, our ego is a problem-making machine. Our ego is an addict for problems. All it wants to do is see problems, talk about problems, try and figure out how to solve problems, create more fucking problems. Like that's what the ego does. And so part of that is, we need to reconcile with hard truths and bring those things forward. And sometimes that hard truth is, I'm not okay with the way that you talked to me last night when we had that conflict, or sometimes the hard truth is I've been withholding how I want to engage in the bedroom. I haven't been honest about that, or whatever it is. And slowly and incrementally starting to bring those truths forward will not only create a deeper level of self-worth within yourself as a man, but is going to produce trust with the woman that you're with, because she'll be able to have more to hold on to. More of you will be there in the relationship. And for you as a man, you're going to develop confidence because you will be bringing out these hard truths of, here's what I've been withholding. Here's what I haven't been saying. Here's what I've been hiding. Here's my needs. Here's my wants. Here's my expectations. I'm not okay with this. And more of you will actually come into the relationship. And so that act of getting more in alignment with integrity is really an act of confidence building. It is an act of self-worth building. And it also builds confidence within men.
It's an act of bravery too. I remember the very first time I ever shared with my now wife, we were just dating at the time, of my battle with pornography. It was literally the hardest thing I've ever done. I actually believe that. And I've been through quite a bit in my life. There was something so shameful, so heavy, it was sucking my life force energy.
Yeah.
And I knew it, and I didn't know how to get out of it. And we'll talk about this on your podcast potentially, but I want to leave men and women with this parting guidance from you. So anything that's a coping strategy that is pulling us away from our integrity as men, the starting place that I heard from you is just calming the nervous system, regulating, and being present to what is. What is parting guidance once someone has metabolized that and is sitting in that, just being in presence with themselves and with what's real? What is the next step that you would desire, if you could wave a magic wand, that every man would be able to start practicing in his life that would surely benefit all the women that are with us too?
I mean, the simple version of it is do the hard shit you don't want to do. Like, truly. Nobody
wants to hear that right now.
Do the hard shit you do not want to do. As a man, it's a very simple formula. You avoid the hard stuff, the hard conversations, the hard admissions, the hard ownership of where you've been screwing up or what you want, what you need, you desire. When you avoid those things, they fundamentally weaken you and break you down as a man. When you confront those, right? Because in my model, change requires confrontation. There is no transformation or change without some type of confrontation. And I understand that it's a very masculine frame, but we as men need that, right? The therapeutic industry is for a lot of men, it's very feminine and it feels too soft. And for me, I approach this as training. It's like you need to confront things in your life to develop your masculine core, to develop your own sense of self-worth, to develop your own competence and confidence. And the truth is that for many men, they do not feel competent at confronting the hard things in their life because they have not trained at it. They have not practiced it. So as you are working on being able to regulate, being in touch with what's happening inside of you, developing some level of emotional mastery, what you should be doing in tandem with that is slowly and systematically and consistently confronting the hard things that you know you need to confront. Whether that's an admission of something that you've been doing, a shitty choice that you made, whether it's something that you've been withholding in a relationship or that you want or need or that you're not okay with, that's where you need to go. That's where you need to move. And as you do that, if you're in a relationship with a woman, she will fundamentally benefit from it because more of you will be in relationship with her. The main problem that I see in so many modern relationships is that men are bringing parts of themselves into the relationship. They're bringing a one-dimensional sliver of who they are with all of this other content that has been withheld. And so as you start to bring more of that into the relationship, you'll figure out whether the relationship's right for you or not. She'll be able to determine whether or not she wants to be with you because she'll really get to know who the hell you are. And I think that's what we really want as human beings. It's to be known, it's to be seen, it's to be understood. And for men, the huge part of the battle is being able to walk through the fire of bringing ourselves out into the world, out of the cave, or to go into the cave and discover who we actually are so that we can begin to bring it back out to the men, to the women that we're in a relationship with. So confrontation, do the hard things every single day, because if you don't, they will cripple you. They will cripple you.
It's so good. Yeah. Just to put a bow on this for my life, anytime I have avoided conflict, it has always been a life force suck. Every single time. There's no shortcut for this stuff. And for many of the people that are still with us, like, this is a call. You know, the hero's journey, you either pick up the call or not. So this is a beautiful call for you to go and get Connor's book. If you're watching on Spotify and YouTube, it's called Men's Work. A practical guide to face your darkness and self-sabotage and find freedom. Freedom is what we're born with. Yeah. All the other shit we learn.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing is, like, all of that withholding, that's not free.
That's not freedom.
That's a cage.
Man, we covered so much ground. Is there anything that your heart, your being wants to bring forth to end the conversation?
Maybe speak to the relational part of it, which is find somebody that you can go through conflict with. You know, we really try and choose partners that, like, we love and we want to have sex with and we want to explore and go on adventures with and build and create and, like, all these lovely things. But at the end of the day, and this is what my wife and I have both seen, you know, she's a couples therapist with like 30,000 hours of working with couples. Ooh. It's the people that you can and are willing to do conflict with that will undeniably change your life. And my wife and I have this saying in our marriage, which is, there's no one else I'd rather go through a hard time with. There's no one else I'd rather go through conflict with. And it's not that we don't ever have conflict. It's that there's no one else I would rather do that with. You know, there's no other woman on the planet that I would rather go through hardship with. And so I think that as people enter into relationships, and I hope that this is part of what they take away from this conversation, it's choosing somebody where you are choosing to do hardship and do conflict with them, because a relationship without conflict is dead in some ways. It's missing an energetic quality and frequency that is natural for the human species, that's needed. You know, every mammalian species, regardless, every mammalian animal, there's conflict between the male and the female. There's conflict. Yeah. But it's how you move through that conflict that's going to determine the quality of a relationship. Ultimately, it's a huge indicator of whether or not you're in the right relationship. And I think if we can approach it from that place, not, I want more conflict relationally. That's not what I'm talking about. It's, do I want to go through conflict with you? can I really trust you to go through conflict with me? Can we work out and be in this dynamic where there's things that are missing, there's things that are hard, and yet I want to do this with you. And so attuning ourselves to that trait of, do I want to do conflict with you? Am I willing to do that? Or is it one of those pieces where it's like, I definitely do not want to do conflict with you? That should be a very clear indicator that it's not the right relationship. So that's
really good, man. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Love the work that you're doing. And I think that there's a reason why so many people have gravitated to it, is because at the end of the day, especially for men, I'm a man, so I'll speak to this. I'm only interested in learning from people that are embodying that which I'm seeking. I would never go get health advice from somebody with a huge belly.
Right.
I wouldn't go to a relationship coach that was like living in Sedona in their van,
Right.
Single. And so forth. So you really have been a testament, and you're a walking embodiment of the fruits that you're bringing for men and your groups. And we didn't have time to talk about your core principles, but we'll link so much in the show today.
Cool.
And thank you for being my guest, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really fun. Really enjoyed this. Y'all share this with somebody who's been struggling, specifically men. 1 in 3 men, literally 1 in 3 men below the age of 30 are not in relationship, yet 2 out of 3 women are in relationship right now. There was a recent study done last year. Share this podcast. It's worthy of sharing. And you never know when just sharing an episode can actually change the trajectory of someone's life. I can't tell you in 10 years of podcasting how many people have written in and been like, this saved my life, this saved my marriage. And I'm like, I'm doing this. I don't need a pin. I don't need an award to share what we're sharing here. I just want to do it because that's what love wants. I was on a call with my mom a month ago, and it came out of nowhere. Some people call it like a spiritual download. And I was like, yeah, Mom, like love is everything, and truth is how it speaks. And I hadn't heard that from any mentor or any teaching ever. But essentially all the things that you're sharing today, and as you share this podcast, you're essentially just sharing truth, which is love, because truth is light. Our body can rest in truth. When we're hiding from our truth, it creates heaviness, it creates illness and disease and so many terrible things that you just don't have to play that game anymore. So until we see you on another podcast, this was number 3. It was my favorite so far.
Awesome.
I'm wishing you love, wellness, but most importantly, peace and power. You cannot have power unless it comes from peace. We'll see you next week.